So in terms of compliance, I think from the outset as an organisation, if you're thinking about open data and it involves personal data, you need to think about, what's the lawful basis for you processing that data. I think then just generally following the main principles of data protection law is really important. So, transparency, making sure that individuals are properly informed about, what data you're going to be processing from them and why.
Hi, Tori. Well, today we're going to be talking about open data. It's one of the topics that we've been covering in our data series for our bandwidth articles. And I think, open data is a really interesting concept, isn't it? The idea that you make data freely available for anyone to access, download and use for their own purposes. And it's obviously part of a push to try and give organizations better access to information so they can use it to their own benefit. So it's probably worth starting just by talking a bit about what some of the benefits might be for innovation and growth in the economy and for organizations more broadly that might come from encouraging open data solutions.
Yeah, so like you said, it can have a lot of benefits in terms of growth and innovation. So by sharing data a lot more openly, we are fostering a more collaborative environment. By doing so, organizations, whether they're sort of established companies or startups, can start sharing information more freely, and that can lead to really identifying new areas in the market. That can then lead to more job opportunities, and generally then we start to see a lot more growth going forward. We're seeing quite a lot of organizations use open data. For example, in the finance industry, we're seeing financial analysts that are using data to try and identify market trends. And then from that, they're able to assess the risk better and then ultimately make more informed investment decisions. We're also seeing retailers, they're using open data quite a lot. And the reason that they're doing that is then they can better track consumer behaviours, and from that they can develop more personalised marketing strategies, which ultimately can lead to more sales going forward. We're also seeing that open data can present aftermarket opportunities for businesses. So, for example, in the manufacturing industries, we are seeing the development of predictive maintenance services, and by doing that, they ultimately can end up with products that are a lot more, reliable and efficient going forward, which is a positive. So yeah, there's quite a lot of opportunities if we do go forward with open data, definitely.
Yeah, and absolutely, and you touched there in a couple of those examples on the fact that you're going to be using data to better understand how consumers, might want to buy products, or how they're responding to products, in terms of the aftermarket example that you gave. That clearly is going to involve, I think, some processing of personal data as information about some of those consumers. Now that brings some challenges, doesn't it, under data protection law? So how do we deal, or what are the issues perhaps that we have with using these open data solutions when organizations are going to, as part of that, be processing some personal data about some of the individuals?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It definitely does present some challenges from a data protection perspective. We're using a lot of data, and a lot of that will involve personal data, and therefore you've got to think about what the implications would be from a data protection law perspective. So in terms of compliance, I think from the outset as an organisation, if you're thinking about open data and it involves personal data, you need to think about, what's the lawful basis for you processing that data. I think then just generally following the main principles of data protection law is really important. So, transparency, making sure that individuals are properly informed about, what data you're going to be processing from them and why. And, you can put privacy statements in place, for example, to try and communicate that. I think it's also important to think about, data minimization as a concept. So, for example, that means really just making sure that you're only using the data that's absolutely necessary for the original purpose that you actually collected the data for. And then just generally there's other principles that you need to really have to think about. So making sure that the data is accurate and ensuring the integrity of the data, storage limitations as well, making sure that everything's kept as securely as possible. So yeah, there's quite a lot to think about from a data protection law perspective. But
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you think organizations then manage that challenge then of the tension of both the need to comply with data protection law, but getting the full benefit of using open data sources in their businesses? How do they balance those two competing kind of kind of sides of the coin as such?
Yeah, so like you say, it is competing, but there's definitely ways around it. So there's different strategies that organizations can put in place to try and mitigate any of the risks around this. One of the main things would be to, anonymize the data. So strip away all the personal identifiers and then not be dealing with personal data itself, and that would best protect the individuals. Also then thinking about, like we were talking about before, transparency. So making sure that you do have those privacy notices in place and that they are really clear and accurate in terms of what you're going to be doing with data. And also, if it's appropriate, making sure that you get consent from individuals and making sure that's valid consent. And also, if you are sharing data with different organizations, it's important to make sure that you have the right data sharing arrangements in place. So data sharing agreements, making sure you're documenting, what it is that you're doing, and how you expect the other organization to use that data and protect that data and keeping it secure.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Tori. That's really interesting to discuss. As I mentioned before, this is part of our data series for the bandwidth campaign that we have. So encourage everyone with me to have a look at our article on open data. Thank you.
Thank you.